If you're looking for insight on mural projects working with big brands and corporations, I think this is going to be the video for you, mainly because I'm going to be talking about one of my latest projects that I just finished up, and that is painting a mural at the Denver Broncos Stadium. Yes, that Denver Broncos. I'm going to be talking about everything from how I got the project in the first place, how it landed in my studio, to how I executed it over the course of 3 weeks. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks if you're wanting to do some projects like this. So let's go. Now, first things first, you're asking yourself, how did this artist get this type of project? And this also leads into one of my first pieces of advice and just insight, and that is, it's not what you know or who you know, it's who knows you. To give a little background on the Denver Broncos organization, a couple of years ago, the prior owners sold to a new ownership group, and now this new ownership group has a slew of new staff, new players, new team, and they're doing a new renovation to the stadium. And part of the renovation task is bringing in local artists to add artwork. It just so happens that the president of the Broncos organization and many of the people in the marketing department know of me and are aware of a lot of the art projects I have done in the city. And that is just because of a combination of 6 degrees of separation. Maybe I worked with one of their family members or friends. I also reached out to the Denver Broncos prior in the year for another art project. And not only that, many of them knew of my work through the Denver Nuggets because I painted a Denver Nuggets mural, a championship mural, after our team won the NBA championship. So all of those awareness touch points made the Denver Broncos and their leadership want to reach out to me to talk about doing a mural at the stadium. Mind you, I don't know anyone from the Denver Broncos personally. It's all because of those different touch points and those 6 degrees of separation. So it goes to show you, it's not what you know or who you know, it's basically who knows you, who is aware that you exist and your artwork is good. So they brought me in for a meeting to talk about adding a mural to the Denver Broncos Stadium, and basically when I was talking to them, I also brought with me a PDF file full of about 30 different artists that I love and I worked with in the past, mainly because I wanted to make this a bigger project. So I wanted to bring in other artists as well and try to make sure this project wasn't just about me. It was basically trying to turn the stadium into like an art walk, like a street art walk that people can sort of experience. So they were super excited about my pitch to them as they were trying to pitch me coming into the stadium. So they picked a couple of different artists from that PDF file that I gave them and brought those artists in as well. Again, it goes to show you, it's not what you know or who you know, it is who knows you, because the artists that I brought in got that opportunity because I was like, hey, I know these artists, I want them in the stadium as well. So after the meeting, I got to walk around with many of them just to see some of the different spaces and sort of walls, because they have a lot of blank white walls that can use artwork. And this gave me an opportunity to think about logistics when it comes to how do I paint on a wall like this? What type of equipment, what type of logistics is needed to accomplish a mural? So this is the wall that I chose. Basically, it is right on the Broncos team store. This is where everyone gets their Broncos memorabilia items and gears and jerseys. So now I have a wall that is set. The next tip that I have for artists is that you have to be as professional as possible, especially when working with bigger brands, on time, doing logistics, all the paperwork. They are not familiar with working with mural artists, so you want to make sure it is as easy as possible for them to bring you into their space to add artwork. And because they're not familiar with how a mural artist works, I had to be the one to actually purchase and rent a lot of the equipment that I needed for this project. So I made sure I was responsible for ordering a lift and making sure that it was delivered on time and making sure I got it to my space in the stadium. Basically, it's all about making sure that these brands and companies don't have to hold your hand. You're not a baby. So you want to make sure, like I said, you are professional and responsible. This also includes preparation. So when I got to my space and set up everything, the first thing that I did was make sure that I masked everything off that they did not want paint on. It takes a long time, but you want to make sure that you leave the space cleaner than when you found it. It takes a long time, but it definitely shortens the amount of time when it comes to cleanups and repairs and sort of packing everything up. You don't have to clean off overspray and a bunch of other splattered paint, so make sure you are professional when it comes to actually preparing your workspace. So now we get to design. The design started out with just 4 players, and it actually grew to 12 players, as well as the prior owner, Pat Bolwin. And the hardest part for this design, because I don't really do that many floating heads and sort of figures in one design, this is the first time doing something like this, the hardest part was actually getting great reference photos of everyone. So I had to do a lot of Google research, as well as diving into the archives of the Denver Broncos. And this is because when you're doing athletes, they always have a weird contraction on their face because they're in motion, they're actually playing the game. And when it comes to football players, American football, they have helmets on. So trying to find pictures of them with the helmets off that look good, that was really difficult. But in the end, I found great photos of each of the individuals. Now, once the design was set and prepped and they approved everything, now it's all about putting paint where it ain't, and that is just on the wall. And I didn't really have to prep the wall in terms of priming it because it was already white. Basically, I primed the entire background with the Behr Premium Plus house paint. And because the scissor lift that I rented from United Rentals didn't arrive until the 3rd day in the project, I basically had to do as much as I could in terms of adding the color and sketching out with a ladder. So I used my ladder as high as I could go safely to add all the colors that I needed to. But once the lift was delivered, that is when I was able to actually cover the entire wall with paint, because that's how I do my work. If you see my work, ton of color, but I prime the background with that color to actually lay on top of that the actual portraits or the figures that I'm doing. And this was totally exhausting, sketching out everything. I used the doodle grid. I'll have a video of how to do the doodle grid, but the doodle grid is basically setting letters, numbers as reference marks, taking a picture, throwing that in the iPad, putting on top of that the image that you want to do. In this case, it was pictures of the players, and that is how I sketched it out. Turned down the opacity so that I can see where I'm putting those lines. And to do the doodle grid, I basically just used chalk to actually make all the different references on the wall so that I can add a ton of detail in there. And once the sketch was up, I was able to wash away the chalk so that I had a clean background full of color. The sketch outline was on there, and then I was able to really just add the flesh tones and colors and helmets and all the different things that I needed to actually render that individual. And like I said, this was super exhausting, mainly because I usually only do 1 to 2 faces in a composition on a wall, but this was a lot of floating heads, and all the heads were a lot smaller than what I usually sort of work with in terms of scale. So I actually had to use my stencil cap almost the entire time when trying to get a lot of the details in the face. So my stencil caps, I have 3 of them. Each of them have a different size in terms of hole in the actual stencil, but they all work together to allow me to really just like capture the details of the hairs, the facial features, eyebrows, things like that. So it worked out really well. I was able to work on this project from about 9 in the morning to 9 at night, so a very long day, but I had other projects in between, so it wasn't like I was working on this every day of the week. There was also events happening at the stadium while I was doing the project, so certain days I wasn't able to work. So like Ed Sheeran did a concert, so I wasn't able to work about 2 of those days. They had a marathon as well. They had other type of events, so there was a lot of days I wasn't able to work. But overall, it took me about 3 weeks from start to finish to actually put together this mural. And not only that, throughout the process of creating this mural, the Denver Broncos added a couple of different changes, which is why this is another tip. In my contract, I also have clauses that say, hey, if you're going to revise the design that I did in the middle of the process, it requires extra compensation. So that is something that you may want to think about adding into your contracts to address situations like this. So there was one trophy that I had in the middle of the design for people to take pictures in front of, for selfies, things like that, with the Lombardi trophy, but they wanted 3 trophies in the end because the Broncos have 3 championship trophies. So I had to add another 2 trophies on both sides of the actual trophy that I did the first time. It wasn't too big of a deal to add that, but basically it was just extra compensation on top of what I actually charged them at the beginning. And like I said, you just want to make sure you have that in your contracts when doing projects like this, because sometimes people will add things to the design in the middle of the process. And lastly, this mural is going to be heavily trafficked, so I want to protect it with a top coat. And what I used was the Bare polyurethane coating. This is a clear water-based coating. I used the matte because I didn't want any sort of shiny sort of glare on it. So I used that on the wall. I put about 3 to 4 coats on the bottom area where people could reach and lean on and put their feet on. And then the top areas, I only did 1 coat because that is not a big issue to me. There's not going to be a lot of wear and tear and abuse on that area. So the total cost of the expenses when it comes to the supplies and materials was about $2,500. That's just like the masking tape, the Bare Premium Plus paint, the extra paint supplies, the spray paint that I got as well. I used a lot of materials that I had left over from previous projects, which was majority of what I was using. So I didn't have a ton of overall expenses to actually complete the mural. So overall, this mural was about $42,000. This is well below the actual cost of what I would have charged in a regular sort of situation, but this was a project that I really wanted to have. I was able to bring in my friends, able to use this as the portfolio piece. Millions of people will see it, and this was just a great opportunity. But that is why I sort of decided to say, hey, you know, 42,000 is okay, and I get other stipulations in terms of I get to meet some of the players, I get to be on the field, I get, you know, tickets to this event, that event, things like that. So this was really amazing in terms of being able to network with a lot of the people that run these organizations. So I walked home before taxes with about 40K. So overall, it was a great project. The mural is planned to be a part of the stadium for as long as the stadium is standing. It's a great opportunity that I believe can open up more doors, and I was able to bring my friends and paint with them as well. So hopefully you get a couple of insights from this video in terms of wanting to do projects like this. How do I get a project like this? You get a little bit of insight if you're an artist, or if you're looking to hire an artist, you know, what this kind of involves. And I will try to make more videos like this, just sharing my experience of doing projects like this and how all of these projects just come about. So check out those videos in the future, and I have some that are already on my feed. So make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you get notified when I do videos like this, and I will see you next time. Peace.